Welcome to the Nightly News Podcast. We are very fortunate today to be joined by Central Penn College Athletic Director Dave Baker. Dave, thank you very much for joining the Nightly News Podcast today.
Well, thank you. I appreciated you inviting me.
It's certainly not a problem. We're also joined by the Vice President of the Nightly News, Yuli Sadejo. Yuli, how's it going?
Good. Hi, everyone.
I just want to congratulate you before we get the show started today. You won the Academic Excellence Award yesterday for having a 3.5 GPA as a club member. What did that award mean to you, Yuli?
I think it means a lot to me. It really feels something important for me because I have people that really don't care about my grades, and I think that getting the award make me think that what I did in class and what I did in the team and the group that I'm involved in is really worth it. And I have to take care some management time. They don't really know how frustrating I am sometimes, and people just say that I'm a happy person, which, yeah, it's true, but also sometimes I have my down moment with my class and I have to do some couple stuff, and the fact that I'm also ESL student, sometimes it's also frustrating, but I keep working hard and keep follow through on what I need to do in my classes and keep doing what I need to do for the team or group or clubs that I'm involved in. So it's really meant a lot to me.
Seriously, Yuli, how many clubs are you involved in?
I probably have 3 or 4 and maybe more, but the one that I'm involved in so far is like probably 2 to 3.
And we are so honored that you are our vice president. So thank you for joining us today on the podcast, and congratulations on your award.
Thank you. And I also want to congratulate you, Professor Miller and Professor Olympi, that won the Club Advisor of the Year, because to me, you mean a lot to me and you give a lot of advices to me. And then you also guide the clubs from the beginning when we set up, when we have the club until now that we have a lot of things to do. And then we have also have the chance to go do the Bill Gladstone project and stuff.
Well, I really appreciate that. If you had any idea how much of an honor it was to me to win that, I certainly was not expecting that. I think that there are many clubs here on campus doing amazing things, and the fact that Professor Olympi and I were recognized in that fashion really, really, really meant a lot to me in my career. And I couldn't be any happier with having this opportunity that I've had here at Central Penn College, and I thank you and Sherry and Norm and Keith and Christine and so many others that have been a part of the Nightly News, and to be honest, I wouldn't have won this award without you guys. I need a team. You can be the best coach in the world, but if you don't have a good team, there's not really a whole heck of a lot that you can do, All right, so back to Dave. Dave, you have moved into a new position with the school since the last time that we spoke. Ironically enough, you were one of our very first podcast guests way back after, not last year, but the year before, when you guys went to the finals of the USCAA basketball tournament with the men's basketball team, and you came on to reflect on the season. That was episode 2, I believe.
Wow.
We are now.
Yeah, it was early on.
We will now be. You will be featured on episode 29, and we've been podcasting for about a year and a half now. So obviously, you've changed roles here with the school. Can you tell us a little bit more about what an athletic director is? I think a lot of times people just kind of throw that term around a little bit, but don't really know what that entails. Can you just tell us a little bit, maybe a day in the life?
Sure. But first, congratulations again to both of you on your awards yesterday.
Thank you.
It was really Adrian did a nice job.
She's wonderful.
Putting together the whole
you.
program, and our speaker, the Spaniard, was fantastic as well.
And I met him before, and he is honestly inspirational, and I've followed him ever since he came to Common Hour a while back, and ever since then I've followed him on social media, and he truly has inspired me and inspires many other people as well.
Yep, good stuff. So yeah, the life of an athletic director. Well, as the last time we talked on a podcast, I was the men's basketball coach, and then I became the athletic director, and my first duty as athletic director was to fire myself as the basketball coach. So that's the ugly part of being an athletic director. But it's interesting because I do a lot of stuff behind the scenes, scheduling games, scheduling officials, fields, paying bills, helping. None of our coaches are full-time here at the school. So, a lot of times I'll meet with potential recruits in all the sports, and just kind of give them the spiel about Central Penn and what our goal is for the athletic program, and how they need to compete in the classroom before they're allowed to go on the field or on the court. So, yeah, so it's been good. I was an athletic director at another school prior to Central Penn, so it was kind of a natural fit for me. I do miss coaching an awful lot. Coached college ball for almost 20 years. My wife was a coach as well, so I think she may have missed it a little bit more than I did. But going to some home games and standing on the sideline was much more nerve-wracking for me than ever when I was on the sideline. So watching it as a fan was much more a lot of pressure as a fan versus a coach.
Of course. Now, Yuli, this is something that I'd like to hear your commentary on. So one of the initiatives, and we've been hesitant to announce this, but it seems that we're definitely going to be following through with this at some point, and we'll follow with some more details. We were approached some time back about potentially calling some of the basketball games. And Yuli, with your time as the manager, to 1 season or 2 seasons?
Technically 2 years, so I don't know how they count the season, but then it's 2 seasons.
So you've been the manager with the women's basketball team for 2 seasons, and one of the things we want to start doing is calling some of the home basketball games. And to be perfectly honest with you, one of the things that I eventually see us doing is coming along for the tournament and live broadcasting all of those games as well. And you had reached out to me and one of the original people that said, I want to call one of these games. Can you talk about why, as a student, that would be something that's very important for our media club to do, but also advantage for our athletics?
I think that this program is really important because I'm pretty sure not only me that is interesting, because there's a lot of people that is also interested in radio, and sport radio, it's also one of them. So I have, I'm pretty sure I'm going to shout out name. I know that Ian is exciting about it, and I know that he can do it because he's also working with the school in a table doing something when they have basketball game at the home. And then as also, I really want to do this, and if I have the chance before I graduated to do this at least once, that would be great. But I want to do it because I've been the manager for 2 years and I learned a lot from them. And then watching how the jury calling their name with their hand symbol, I kind of understand. And then I sometimes ask the team, what does that mean? Or what is it called? Why they are calling that and stuff like that. So I kind of understand a little bit. And I also have a basketball background behind me before I became the manager. I played before in my high school back when I was at my country in Indonesia. Yes. But
did you ever think about trying out for the team?
She's a shark.
No, because it's a little bit different in English and Indonesian. So when I was applying for the team, I don't really get it. Which I actually initially, before I become the manager, I didn't intend to join the team. But when I was talking to the coach, they thought I want to join the team. But I was shy back then when I was having my first term. So it's kind of like...
I can't imagine you being shy at all.
Oh, I was really shy because I don't really know anybody at the team. When I came to the gym, I'm like, I'm just going to be an open person here. And then I came in and I watched this. The coach was sitting, and I remember that time when she said, are you coming for a play or joining the team? I said, I guess so. And then, are you students? No, I'm the coach. Oh, okay, great. So that's how I started my journey as the basketball manager, because then at the end of practice, I know that I'm not going to be able to do it as time and clubs that I'm involved in. So I told her that I want to be the managers.
But at least you're involved somehow, and then you're going to use all this knowledge that you've built to be able to call some of the games.
Yes.
Now, Dave, from your perspective as the athletic director, why would it be so important for us to take this initiative to start calling some basketball games, start calling some baseball games? What are the advantages for our sports programs by doing that?
Oh, it's the next level of progression for us. I mean, when we look at what we need to do to get student athletes at Central Penn, there's a great deal of personal time spent recruiting kids, and the basketball program has been successful over the last 6 years going to the national tournament, and it's to the point where kids are starting to recruit us. They want to come play here, and expanding our footprint by allowing us to have a different medium, either through live stream or calling games or both. It can reach, we have a kid on the baseball team from Florida who's really good. And Jerry, if he has teammates that want to come, how do they know about Central Penn? Well, if they can check out a game on over the internet and hear it it becomes more real for them, and then they can see what they're getting themselves into. So yeah.
The reason that to me this is so important from a club perspective, from a communications department perspective, is one of the big things that when I came on board here, and I had just celebrated 4 years of being here, and I've been full-time for about a year and a half, but was that I just noticed that we didn't have a news organization. We didn't have a podcast studio, and this is one of the things that very, very easily, early on, we were able to save up enough money to come up with this, and it has been huge. I mean, just over the last month alone, we've had as much listenership in the last month as we had for almost the entire year before that, which means that sort of the if you build it, they will come sort of thing. But on the same rationale to some of these sporting events, so I always try to look at it from a student perspective. So many of our students in our communications program want to get involved in sports. Mm-hmm. And frankly, if they don't get some experience while they're here, or maybe even an internship or something like that, it's going to be tough to get a job while they're out there. And if that's what they want to do, I want to help them get to where they need to be. And with the way that technology has fallen so much in price and ability to do this, I mean, even 5 years ago, putting together a podcast studio would have cost 5 times as much as it did. 5 years ago, doing what we were going to do really wasn't even possible because Facebook Live and YouTube live streaming didn't exist.
Yeah.
Now that it has, and we have a free medium to go, we can just get around the networks. We can go right from us right to the consumer or whoever it is or the people that are interested parties. And I just think that is so important to the future of our program, to the future of our college, which is leading me into my next question. One of the things that we have talked about for quite some time is the fact that we've acquired all of this land on the opposite side of the street on Valley Road from our Summerdale campus. Would you say it's fair to say that with that land acquisition, we've almost doubled in area?
I'm not sure what the actual acreage is on our current campus versus what's over there, but it certainly is a significant piece of property.
Now, can you talk to us a little bit more about the long-term plan of what this land is going to be used for?
Yeah, we'd like to expand our footprint across the street. As you notice that we've already put signage up this side of the road, and I'm certainly not trying to speak for Dr. Scafaro, but she would like to have a fencing of some kind with some chain and banners and whatnot, but across the way is really, the property is really good for an athletic facility, athletic fields, a complex of if not, and then that helps drive helps drive our business program, because we could do a lot of interesting partnerships in the classroom and provide a lot of jobs for our students. So yeah, that's what we'd like to do.
And realistically, too, almost every major here on campus could benefit in some way from a sporting complex. I mean, from IT to getting the computer systems up and running, to communications, calling the games, setting up events, those types of things, to our business department, to our marketing department, all of these things. And that's one of the things that I try to do with the comm department, is I try to get them involved in other things on campus too. And I think that something like this could be so special to all programs across the board. And we're talking about just giving students more of a chance, more of an opportunity to get experience, because to me, that's what's so important. So long term, you're thinking of a sports complex. Obviously, we have a soccer team, we have a baseball team, we have a basketball team. We're starting some new sports as well. I know that there was a couple that I left out, so please, I apologize if that's the case. But one of the reasons that you wanted to come down here today is to talk about our new track and field team that you said is going to be starting up in January, and you are presently recruiting athletes now.
Yeah, it's. I think it's long overdue for Central Penn to have a track team for a couple of reasons. I get an opportunity to survey students, and we have a lot of athletes that are on campus that don't participate in basketball or participate in volleyball or baseball, but they were track athletes in high school. And then we have a link on our webpage, our athletic webpage, that has an athletic questionnaire, and we have a number of students who always inquire about track and field. So it seems like the next natural progression for us to recruit student athletes to fulfill a track and field program. So I'm excited about it. I think it. Not only do I think that the teams would have a lot of participants, I think our goal would be 30 men and 30 women, but I could see us starting off with 15 to 18 men and women on the track team. But I think we'd be really good. I think we would really compete nationally in the USCAA with track and field.
I would love for you to come back on the podcast sometime, maybe over the summer term, and we can do a whole podcast about track and all of the different events, and maybe, to sort of help your recruiting effort, you might be able to sort of share this with people who are interested and learn more about it. I think that would be something that would be fantastic. Maybe
if we can live stream it, I can get you going over hurdles and going down doing a pole vault. That would be good TV, don't you think, Yuli?
Yeah, that would be cool.
I'm honestly, the only thing I do is I'm a tennis player. I like to play tennis, and I'm also a fairly accomplished bowler.
Oh, nice.
So I do.
Central Penn used to have a really good bowling team.
Well, maybe that's something we can revisit at another time. But I've been bowling since I was 8 years old, and I just recently got back into it after not bowling since I was pretty much 18 years old, other than taking the kids and stuff like that. But it's a lot of fun. I enjoy it. So one of the things that we also wanted to talk about, so we have the track team coming up. You're recruiting athletes right now. Let's just say someone out there is listening and saying, you know what, I'd be really interested in hearing more about track and field. How can they either find more information, or do you just prefer them contact you directly?
Well, there's a couple different ways. One is, there's a link on our website. Through the admissions process, they also ask questionnaires to our students. Our athletic website has an athletic questionnaire on it. They can do it that way. They can contact me directly. And this is just not for track. I mean, it's also for, like I said, we hope to get our programs, I think with the job the baseball team did this year, making it to the small school college World Series. I think they're going to be close to being in the same boat as the men's basketball program, is that people are going to start taking notice and want to come play for us, and start the recruiting process ends up taking care of itself. So track and field is certainly going to be added to there. And then, if any students interested in athletics can contact me or go through the website.
Cool, and I will make sure to put your email along with the article that comes along with this. All right, the last thing that I wanted to talk about today is something I want to turn to Yuli first on. Yuli, obviously you've been a part of the media club for quite some time. We've always been very supportive of the baseball team. How excited were you when you heard the news that they were going to the Small College World Series for the first time?
It was amazing. I was excited for them, even though I wasn't really knowing them well, because their team's just really working hard, and I know some couple people from the team, and I'm grateful for them.
Okay, so for the people that you knew from the team, what did it mean to them to go to the College World Series?
I'm pretty sure they were exciting, and then they know that they want to win for sure, and then they really look forward to the games and the team as they build together. And I know that they have a lot more new people now, new students that has just joined the team too.
So what did it mean, Dave, to the college for, the baseball team's been in existence for 3 seasons, right? Mm-hmm. For in 3 seasons, for us to be able to go to the Small College World Series, what did that mean?
Well, it's great for Central Penn from a holistic standpoint. It, again, any time we get an opportunity to compete on a national level, it gives us national press. So that's great. More importantly, it's really great for our student athletes, because we have 9 freshmen on the team. Coach Hitz did a nice job recruiting kids, of course. And even though we're in this period of transition of looking for a new baseball coach, we need to make sure that, those 9, that core group of 9, stay together and take care of each other and move on through this process. And the ability to, I'm just going to keep referencing Jerry Biller because he's from Florida. I'm not sure when we started the program we'd ever think we'd have a player from 1,400 miles away want to come to Pennsylvania. I mean, we're talking about Florida. We're not talking about Alaska. We're talking about Florida, where it's,
they've got some good baseball programs down there as well,
and they have some great weather. And that's really the advantage of Southern schools, is they play a much longer season, get a lot more games in, because their weather allows them to do that. We're up here in the Northeast. We only played 28 games this year,
and we almost lost nearly a month due to weather, which was unbelievable. It just seems like every single time that we were supposed to have a nice day, something would happen, or it would just be really cold, or the field wasn't in playing condition. I mean, it's really tough. I mean, February is when they're starting their season. I mean, it's tough to play that early in the year too.
Yeah, but we also have drawn players from the local area, Redland High School, Bishop McDevitt, So, CD East.
I think just from my experience, I played baseball growing up. I mean, I probably played for 10 years when I was growing up. And I believe that this central Pennsylvania area is very rich in baseball and has a lot of potentially really, really good players to draw from. So, of course, we're always on the lookout for people coming from maybe out of state or something like that. But I think we've got a lot, and I'm sure you would know better than I, but I think we've got a lot of really excellent baseball programs in this area to draw potentially student athletes from.
Yeah, it is. This is a great, and Maryland is another great location for baseball. But again, in our mission of what we try and do with our student athletes, we're most, was it great going to the USCA tournament in the Small School World Series? Yes, it was. But I think, as I shared yesterday, I think our biggest accomplishment is that 25% of the team were academic All-Americans, and the team grade point average is about a 2.8, and we're close to 100 academic All-Americans since we've been competing in the USCA for about 8 years.
And that was the last thing. I didn't want you to think I was forgetting that. That was going to be the cherry on top. Yesterday we had our clubs and activities banquet, also our activities and athletics banquet. And one of the things that I was just very, very, very blown away by was when you got up and you said that we have 97 academic All-Americans. And I wanted to clarify something, and this is a point you made, was that it's a little tougher for us to have that number because we don't have a team like a football team where there's a lot more students on the team. Football teams, I mean, I would imagine something like Penn State probably carries close to 100 players, right? Even though they're only dressing a certain number of those. The fact that we have 97 academic All-Americans, what does that say not only to you about our programs, but about you and the mentorship that you give so many of these students?
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that, but it's really not about me. It's about the professors that work with them and are willing to go the extra mile for our student athletes. And because, the schedules are rigorous. Usually with the women's basketball team, you take a trip, you have to, you're playing back-to-back games, getting home at 3 o'clock in the morning. Kids are going to class, but they don't have the energy that they need. We try and make sure that they do, and make sure that they go to class, and we monitor that. But again, it's the whole process of a campus embracing what our student athletes can do. And yes, 97 is a great number. 148 is the better number because that's the number of awards, All-American awards we've received, because the number of those student athletes are multiple winners in multiple sports. So it's 97 individuals over the last 8 years is really, really a cool number to establish.
Yes, Yuli.
It's definitely, I can also say from the manager perspective, seeing them, even though I'm not on the field, like practicing with them with the women basketball. And I think that I see how hard they work in the court and also in class, trying to come to class and then work their way through the school, and being active in sports is really difficult because that's one of the reasons why you require energy, time, and attention to be able to focus on both that you have to acquire for your education succeed and your sports succeed and your goals as a sport and as a student coming to Central Penn to get your degree too. So I've really seen them work hard really well, and then I'm proud of them that some of them winning some of the awards.
Yuli, that's a great point, and I'm glad you're here. I didn't know you were going to be here today.
I know.
I always try to get a student on. Sometimes with scheduling and things, sometimes it falls through. But Yuli's usually pretty good about coming down and helping us out.
So the USCA National Convention is next week, and Central Penn College has proposed that support students, not just student athletes, be recognized as well in the academic All-American process. So managers, stat people, because the amount of the time commitment is the same. I mean, you put in the same amount of hours as the players do, and to not be recognized for that under the same guidelines, so we have put that proposal in. Hopefully in a couple of weeks I'll let you know.
Thank you.
Well, there you go.
And also the practice time, we usually practice between 8 to 10 p.m. So I kind of see how hard it is. And then the coach are with the women basketball, they're trying to being flexible with the schedule. Sometimes sometimes like this couple past season, we had a practice during 6:30 to 8:30 or sometimes 4:30 to 6:30. So I'm really grateful for what school already given to us for the athletic, being the manager, seeing them how work they hard, and then how hard they work, and then also focusing on education with the time, practice, the game, back to back. Sometimes we have to go road trip.
Well, I just want to thank the both of you for coming down today. I just want to remind everyone that we are starting a track and field program, that we are currently recruiting athletes. That season's going to start around the end of January, but we're starting to try to take stock of where some of the interests are. Obviously, we do want to congratulate the baseball team for making the Small College World Series for the first time. And to be perfectly honest, I appreciate your candidness, Dave, about the complex across the street and some of the other things that have been going on. So I just really, really want to thank you for joining us today. And certainly, Yuli, thank you as well for talking about some of your experiences with some of our sports here on campus.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay, so for Athletic Director of Central Penn College, Dave Baker, and for Vice President of the Nightly News, Yuli Sadejo, this is Professor Paul Miller with the Nightly News Podcast. We'll be right back with our second segment from Jon Butchar, former Senior Deputy Attorney General of the state of Pennsylvania. So we'll be right back with Jon.
Hello, this is Dr. Marcy Rovin, Assistant Professor of English, and you're listening to the Nightly News Podcast.
Welcome back to the Nightly News Podcast. This is Professor Paul Miller here joining you today. So fortunate to be joined by Jon Butchar, former Senior Deputy Attorney General of the state of Pennsylvania. So, Jon, thank you so very much for joining us today.
You're very welcome. My pleasure.
So we have a couple of topics that we're going to talk about today, and like I said, this is going to be a two-part series, so we're going to get to some other things that we'll preview before the end of the show. But one of the questions that I had for Jon before he came down today is North Korea. Obviously, North Korea is really a bipartisan issue on how we're going to deal with them. It's not that maybe one side maybe favors a more aggressive approach, but the simple fact that North Korea is a major threat to us is something that everyone can agree on. So I was really interested in learning a little bit more about this, and I know that you've got some background in this subject.
Well, I have one of my backgrounds is in political science and history. It's one of my degrees from college. And I stay up with that, and I'm always fascinated when both the mass public but also the leading officials seem to have very little understanding of the history and what goes into turning a country like North Korea into a rogue nation. Really, that's what I'd like to focus on first, is how we got to this point.
I would love to know how we got to this point. How did, maybe even as far, I'm sure it even went back even further than the Korean War, but I'm sure that was a major issue that still carries on to this day, that just the tension between North and South Korea for sure, and with the rest of the world. So can you give us a little bit of a history and maybe, what role maybe we played into it?
Well, we played a big role. But first of all, if you look at the history of the Korean Peninsula, it's a very old culture. Goes back thousands of years, and in 1392, 100 years before Columbus sailed the ocean blue, we had a dynasty established in Korea that lasted from 1392 to 1910, the Joseon dynasty. And that's the longest running dynasty in Eastern Asia in history. So a very stable, but a very developed culture, and the Korean people are very proud people. In the late 1900s, or early 1900s, both Russia and Japan were seeking to impose their influence on Korea. And in 1904, 1905, there was the Russo-Japanese War. Not a lot of people even heard of that one. But it was about a year and a half, 2-year war fought between Japan and Russia over the control of Manchuria and Korea. The Japanese won that war. And basically, they made Korea a protectorate, not with the consent of the Korean people. And then in 1910, they just annexed Korea. So Japan just took it over, forcibly took it over. In the subsequent years, there were lots of dissent, lots of peaceful demonstrations, as one would imagine. And Japanese were brutally suppressed. Killing thousands. So Japanese have been a thorn in the side of Korea for a long time. So once, as I said, that was 1910, and they tried to eradicate the Korean culture. I mean, they banned Korean writing, they banned use of the language, they tried to make everybody in the Japanese mold. And then we get to World War II. Japan's still in charge of Korea, still ruling the whole country. There is no North and South Korea at that time. And during the World War II, Japan conscripted tens of thousands of men to fight on the Japanese side. And, of course, the most infamous thing that people know is they basically stole a couple 100,000, at least 200,000 men and women, or women and girls, young girls, to use as sex slaves. And that's one of the more infamous periods of Japanese history. They just in the last 10 years finally apologized to the Koreans for that. But so if you're a Korean, how do you feel about the Japanese at this point? You know, you've had a history of from 1900 through World War II of being dominated, controlled, owned by the Japanese. And do you like the Japanese? Probably not. So
I wouldn't think so, no.
So anyway, during the World War II, the powers, which is Russia, U.S., Britain, all decided by around 1943 that at the end of the war, Korea would become independent and its own whole independent nation again. And as the war wound down, what happened was right before the Japanese surrendered, the Russians rolled into Korea, tanks and in force. The Japanese surrendered. At that point, the Allies agreed to divide Korea into two protectorate zones, two occupation zones. The South zone was to be overseen by the Americans, and the Northern zone by the Russians, who, of course, remember, were still allies in World War II. So that's where we got the initial split of Korea. It's coming out of World War II, the Southern zone to be controlled by the Americans, etc. At that point, we also had a fledgling United Nations. And the United Nations determined, all parties agreed at that point, more or less, that Korea should have democratic elections. The Russians, at that point, the Soviets said no. So basically the borders were closed. There was a lot of give and take about unification, but the Russians were in control in the north. They basically closed the border. They installed a dictatorship, a communist dictatorship under Kim Il-sung, who is now, the great father of North Korea and a revered and godlike status. And so the Soviets ignored calls for an election. In the South, the U.S. had democratic elections. Syngman Rhee was the first elected president of South Korea. The UN recognized South Korea as a legitimate state, and the UN did not recognize the government of North Korea as a legitimate state. So this went on for a couple of years, and of course this in the aftermath of World War II, where the U.S. had defeated the Japanese in the Pacific, and at a certain point, a couple of years in, while we had this stalemate, the U.S. withdrew most of its forces from Korea, some coming home, some going to other spots in the Pacific, some just to Japan. And in 1950, the North Koreans poured across the border in mass. About 75,000 troops drove right to Seoul, South Korea, which is only about 35 miles from the border with North Korea, took over South Korea, and were going to establish a communist rule in all of Korea. At this point, the United Nations got involved, mostly United States troops, and the United States landed. In a short summary, drove the Koreans back out, the North Koreans back out of the south, almost to the Yalu River, the border with China, at which point the Chinese got involved and everything sort of stalemated back around the 38th parallel, which is the original line, are sort of arbitrarily picked to divide North and South, more or less in the middle. So that's how we got to that point. We had we have North Korea supplied by the Russians and Chinese, South Koreans backed by the Americans, and the Korean War fell into a stalemate. Now, Korean War is often called the Forgotten War because we didn't study it a lot in our history books. People don't know how bloody it was. Most of the fighting took place in 1 year. Within 1 year, most of the big battles took place from 1950 to 51. when it stabilized, and then you had 2 years of peace talks going on. But during the peace talks, you still had an unbelievable amount of bloody battles going on. The Korean War in total lasted about 3 years. The United States casualties were 40,000 killed, over 100,000 wounded and missing. So even though it was a short war, it was a very bloody war. During the 3 years until an armistice was signed, not a truce, not a peace, the United States continued to bomb the North. And we bombed every city, every town, every village, every place there were 2 bricks on top of another. The estimates are that in this bombing, over the 3-year period, the United States Air Force killed between 1 million and 3 million civilians. These were not military targets. These were every city, every village. It was target practice for our newly developed jets. Coming out of World War II, it was just when jets were being created and being tested.
And my grandfather was a Korean War veteran in the Air Force.
My uncle was a Korean War veteran. It wasn't something he ever wanted to talk about.
Never talked to him about it. I mean, he died when I was very young, but he never talked about it, even with my grandmother or my mother, really at all.
Well, it was a brutal war. It was massacres galore on both sides. There were massacres of minimum of 7,000 to 10,000 people at a time by Americans, of North Koreans. So that's where what North Korea knows of Americans is that we have brought unbelievable firepower, unleashed, 635,000 tons of bombs on the North. I believe the figure was something like 75,000 tons of napalm. So just like in Vietnam, which we did see pictures of growing up, we just obliterated entire villages, entire cities.
Imagine if the media of today was around when Korea. I mean, we get whether Donald went about it the appropriate way or not. When he is bombing Syria, it's a week-long story, but yet we'd done 50 times that back then, and we rarely even talk about it.
Well, we did thousands of times. That is what we did. Yeah, if you picture, we commemorate 9/11 because it was a horrendous terrorist attack on our soil. Over 3,000 people were killed, and it's a national commemoration every year. The North Koreans to this day commemorate the millions literally killed by the imperialist Americans, as they refer to us, and every June, which is coming up, is celebrate the defeat of the imperialist American month. Because, of course, we ultimately did not win the Korean War, so they count that a victory. So picture that today. I mean, we commemorate 9/11. It was a horrific attack, 3,000 killed. But picturing that one day, and then the next day is another one, and the next day there's another one, and it goes on like that for 3 years. If you're North Korean and your country keeps that propaganda in the forefront.
Which they do because they own the media.
Absolutely. There's no free media in North Korea. So this is what the people get and learn. So do those people hate the Americans? You bet. Do they think we're imperialists out to kill them and just destroy their culture? Of course, because that's what they experienced during that time. And that's been kept alive to this point.
I suppose I follow you that far because, to be honest with you, this is part of the reason I got involved with communications, because back when I was in college, we did a report, a paper for one of my classes about, something involved with 9/11. And I just, when I was 18, 19 years old, I just didn't get why Al-Qaeda hated us so much. It's the exact same reason why the North Koreans hate us, because in that area, the government controls the media. The media is nothing more than a propaganda arm of the government itself, which is often a dictatorship-type government or, very, very supreme rule. And ever since they're kids, they grow up hating and learning to hate us for things that we've done in the past. But my question is this. If they know what our firepower is, if they know what we're capable of, why would they even mess around with some of the missiles that they've already been test launching. We already know that. One of them we crashed, hypothetically speaking, crashed down because of hacking or potentially other reasons why it went down in the ocean. But why would they even mess with us like that if they already know what our firepower is? Isn't that almost like suicide?
Well, it can be. Now, the question is, how crazy is the leadership there? Okay, and that goes back to the first dictator established by the Soviets coming out of World War II was Kim Il-sung. In 1994, his child took over, Kim Jong-il, who ruled to 2011, and then his son Kim Jong-un is now in charge. And how do they view? How do they view the possible annihilation? Well, in their view, they've been under that thumb all along. Do they know we have enormous firepower? Of course we do. That's probably why we haven't gotten into a full-scale war at this point. But you have to also remember, North Korea is not defenseless. North Korea has the fourth largest standing army in the world, 1.2 million men, and we have 1.4.
I think that's an underrated statistic. That's not one I've heard very frequently.
As they have thousands of tanks, thousands of artillery pieces. Seoul, Korea is 35 miles from the demilitarized zone, the border. If they were to mass a few 100,000 troops and just send them north or send them south, would they capture much of South Korea? They could, and would it be incredibly costly in terms of lives? Absolutely. But could they do it? Could they achieve a partial victory before maybe they were annihilated? They could. If you have that large an army supported by fanatical regime and a fanatical populace that believes we're only out to get them, is it possible they would launch that type of attack, forcing us to retaliate, possibly with nuclear weapons? Because we know from Donald Trump, he says, why, if we have them, why not use them? We also have, we have developed smaller tactical nuclear weapons that are not the monster ones that we used to use. So we do have also tactical field nuclear weapons, which maybe is even more dangerous because you're more likely to use them. Oh, we'll just kill 100,000 instead of wipe out 1 million.
We don't want to get down that slippery slope.
Well, that's the question: is how do we stop? How do we go down there? Now, certainly, we've had a policy over the last many years through a few presidents of something called strategic patience. And that's a policy we use not just with a dictatorship like North Korea, but other places in the world where we work with the UN, we work with other countries, bring sanctions, try to keep them from going too crazy, in the hopes that the natural evolutionary process would cause their people at some point to change their form of government. Very difficult when you have an iron-handed dictatorship running the country. But that's part of the goal, is do things change? Do they evolve? Can a country evolve into becoming more part of the world community?
Similar to Cuba, right?
Exactly. So you have two approaches. One is send aid to the north, let the people get a better feel of what's going on in the South, because the South is a very modern, now affluent country, and the North is still impoverished greatly. There's still people dying of starvation in North Korea. So at different times, depending on the regime in South Korea and the regime in the United States, we have both used a carrot and a stick approach, where you try to bring aid, you try to soften the angst, soften the anger between the two, hoping that they could be brought into the more worldwide community. So you have two options. One option is you take that route, putting off major conflict, knowing all the while that as that country strengthens itself, that could be worse down the road. But at the same time, you might avoid major war altogether down the road. On the other hand, if you take the belligerent stance, which we've now adopted.
Shocking, I know.
Yes, well, our stance is now, we're going to take care of this problem. If taking care of that problem was as simple as taking out a leader or walking in and everybody saying, "Yay, hooray, the Americans here to liberate us." That would be one thing. But if we go that route, and if we make the first strike, I think we're looking at an incredible number of casualties on both sides.
Well,
And if I may,
yeah.
in war, the side that always gets hurt the worst is the civilian side. It's not the
just
the
look
combatants.
at Syria.
Yes, not the combatants. And in any war, it is the population, it is the people, the innocent people who suffer.
We're here with Jon Butchar, former Deputy Attorney General of the state of Pennsylvania.